Sometimes, life has a funny way of bringing together the people who are meant to make each other better. In this bizarre instance, it even enlists the help of the afterlife to bring two people who are unlikely to meet during their lifetime. Elvis Morrow is a young mortician who is very good at his job. The families of the corpses he has embalmed always remark on how good-looking and peaceful their deceased relatives look after getting taken care of by Morrow Funeral Home. Elvis is aware of this and has developed a habit of taking a photograph after doing his job. But everyone in their town thinks it is his father, Charlie, who does all the work. The truth is, Charlie has been a hunchback and mentally handicapped for a long time, so his son Elvis is doing all the work in secret. He hasn't got his license as a mortician, and for this reason, he's asked his father to pose as the true mortician when the situation necessitates it. So far, the locals haven't pointed out anything strange about this, so all's good for Elvis and Charlie. Elvis cares for his father very much. Sometimes bullies target Charlie and make fun of him, but Elvis will always protect his father from them. When they have the time, they visit the bridge where his mother took her life. There, Elvis tentatively steps on the ledge and thinks how it would feel to end it all. But the wind mysteriously pushes him back, as if saying his life is too precious to end this way. And Elvis realizes that may be true, especially when he tucks his father in his bed like a child and reads him some stories he wrote himself. The other protagonist, Annabelle Lee, is a well-loved beauty queen in their town. She's set to represent Cameron County to compete for the title of Miss Texas Rose, and the winner will represent their state in the national pageant. She looks lively and cheerful at first, but there are issues hidden beneath her sweet personality. Her mother, Geneva, has always entered her into beauty pageants since she was young. Because of this, Annabelle is made conscious of her body and develops bulimia. Geneva has always wanted a better life for herself and her daughter, but she's doing it in a way that negatively affects Annabelle mentally, emotionally, and physically. In addition, Annabelle doesn't feel safe around her stepfather, Jimmy. When he asks for a good luck hug, Annabelle feels awkward and uncomfortable. It's implied that Jimmy is an alcoholic, who may have abused Annabelle when he's drunk. As she looks out of the hotel room window, Annabelle sees how high up the room is. She thinks about how it would feel if she falls to the ground, and how the cemented road would bring a finality to her life. But there's no time to ruminate about these things. There's a pageant to be won, and she intends to do it. The Miss Texas Rose pageant is locally famous. It is broadcasted for those who choose to watch at home. Behind the scenes, it's a melee of women running for makeup and gowns and hair doss. Annabelle is one of them, and with her mother there, she feels confident she will bag the crown. Eventually, the event comes to its anticipated conclusion. Annabelle is crowned Miss Texas Rose. Geneva is overjoyed, knowing her daughter's crown will bring fortune and opportunities. Annabelle takes her walk as the newly crowned beauty queen. Just then, her surroundings seem to be spinning and blurring. To the shock of everyone, she falls on the stage, her crown rolling away. Her passing is declared at 1 in the morning, due to sudden cardiac arrest brought about by an eating disorder. This incident is dubbed a night of pageantry turned into tragedy. Elvis sees the report on the television, but he couldn't care less about it. A few days later, he meets with Annabelle's parents. They have preserved her body using cryogenics to slow down the decomposition. Geneva requests that her daughter should be made beautiful for the last time. When the body arrives, Elvis prepares for the embalming. He checks for the pulse as standard procedure, making sure the corpse has none. As he closes the corpse's mouth, he can't help but notice how soft it is. Giving into his intrusive thoughts, Elvis kisses Annabelle's lips. But in the process, he accidentally pushes the clicker for his camera's shutter, taking a photo of the act. At the same time, a strong gust of wind opens the windows. Elvis gets up and closes them. But he sees something that's sure to make anyone's heart stop with terror. Reflected on the window panes is the corpse of Annabelle getting up, coughing as if she hadn't breathed for days. Which, technically, is true, and that's why Elvis is so shocked to see this happen. Then she lays still on the embalming table. He rushes to her and feels the artery on her neck. He even leans on her chest. Sure enough, her heart is beating. Elvis doesn't waste time and calls an ambulance. He also talks to Charlie and orients him about what he's supposed to say. Thankfully, Charlie understands the situation and tells the reporters a brief and concise report of what happened. That Annabelle has come back to life, she coughed when she woke up, and there's no denying her heart beating after that first cough. Annabelle is brought to the hospital. Geneva is so relieved that her daughter is alive. The doctors are not surprised about this, because it can happen to anyone given the right conditions. But the beauty queen's return to life has become a sensation on local and national television. Reporters flock to the hospital's entrance, pointing their cameras at her and madly clicking away. Annabelle is still trying to get a bearing on her second life. But every time she looks at the cameras, or hears their shutters, she gets a vision of someone leaning over her. Geneva doesn't waste the attention given to them because of her daughter's miracle. Annabelle is still the reigning Miss Texas Rose, so her mother is accepting all manner of invitations for interviews, guestings, and photo shoots related to the title. But the daughter doesn't seem thrilled. During a photo shoot, Annabelle's keeps spacing out. The camera shutter keeps reminding her of that blurred, skewed vision of someone leaning over her. Geneva calls for a break and uses the time to excitedly tell her that they have a scheduled guest appearance at opera. However, Annabelle is not enthusiastic about it. She's much more excited to join some kids nearby playing jump rope. Meanwhile, Elvis continues living his ordinary life. He has decided he and Charlie should stay out of the limelight after getting involved with Annabelle's incident. He sees on the television a piece of news about the upcoming story of the beauty queen's return to life, which makes him a bit prejudiced towards Annabelle. As he's about to start his work, he hears a knock on the door. The beauty queen he's thinking about earlier is now on his doorstep. Annabelle politely asks to see Charlie. She wants to talk to him about the details of how she came to life. Elvis makes an excuse that his father is not available at the moment. Annabelle looks at Elvis and thinks he's familiar, to which he says maybe they went to the same school. He introduces himself to her. She smiles at him and says she'll come back whenever Charlie's available. Then she leaves. Elvis feels bizarre after this meeting. But who wouldn't? It's trippy to know that the corpse you were supposed to embalm is now alive and walking. And despite his nonchalant, pessimistic attitude, Elvis can't deny that he's smitten with Annabelle's sweet demeanor. When she comes home, she sees her mother entertaining a psychiatrist. They think she needs therapy so she can get back to enjoying the glamour and the spotlight. But Annabelle is tired of it all. As she points out, none too gently, it's her mother who is setting up all the schedules and not her, implying that her life has never been in her control. That night, she dreams about being inside a coffin, gasping for air. She sees her parents praising her for being pretty, even when she's having a hard time breathing. Annabelle wakes up and breaks down. She feels suffocated. The incident has made her realize that she never wanted any of this, becoming a beauty queen and all. In fact, she realizes she has never known what she really wanted in life. Plagued by emotions and questions, she runs away. She rides a bike. It is just before dawn, with the moon shining enough light on her way. For the first in her life, she's enjoying the cool breeze and the speed of riding a bike. Without really thinking about it, she finds herself in front of the Morel funeral home. She hadn't intended to go there, but now that she has, she sees that the place looks spooky. She decides to park her bike in the front yard and enter the house. The occupants are still asleep, so she takes this chance to explore until she finds the door to the morgue. Ever since she woke up, Annabelle has been curious about the place and the person who witnessed her return to life. It's still a mystery how she came back to life, but it's more so, on her part, about why she came back to life. She thinks that coming back here will provide her with some answers. She even lies down on the table, trying to remember the first few conscious memories she had before waking up. Then she hears some scuffling. She screams as Elvis enters the room, ready to swing his golf club. The two keep blaming each other for miscommunicating. In the end, Annabelle apologizes for entering the house without permission, and Elvis puts down the club. Charlie sees them, and his son reminds him about his role as the person who saw her back to life. The old man understands and says his lines, adding that Annabelle is a beautiful girl. Annabelle is about to leave, but then she asks if she can stay until sunrise, to which Elvis relents. She finds out through a picture that Elvis is a fourth-generation mortician in the family, which seems interesting to her. He serves her breakfast, and after a few minutes, sees her out of the door. She looks lost as she asks if there's a nearby barn where she can stay for the day. Annabelle doesn't want to go home. But it doesn't diminish the hope in her eyes, as she says she'll just find a hotel somewhere. Giving into pity, Elvis lets her stay in the house. He lends her some of his old clothes and instructs her to stay inside. However, Annabelle takes the chance to accompany Charlie during one of his golf matches. She tries to ask him for details about the incident. Even though Charlie sticks with his lines, she's not convinced. For her, something doesn't feel right in his story. Elvis chides her for pestering his father, but Charlie is all okay with it. Elvis tells Annabelle that his father has not always been mentally addled. He says that years ago, a group of teenagers threw a beer bottle at Charlie, hitting him in the head. Then Elvis smirks and suggests that Annabelle may be friends with them. She gets offended by this and says that perhaps he should get hit by a bottle of beer as well. The three of them sit at a gazebo and talk some more. Annabelle remarks about the chipping paint on the walls. A new coat of paint would make it look livelier. Elvis finds this ironic and simply leaves her there. But she's not someone to give up easily. She looks at the garage and finds some white paint, brushes, and a ladder. Then she starts to paint one side of the house, to the exasperation of Elvis and the amusement of Charlie. While Annabelle is busy being a painter, her mother Geneva is worried sick about her daughter's whereabouts. She tries to calm herself as she watches old footage of Annabelle joining beauty contests when she was a toddler. Late that night, Annabelle sees Elvis reading a story to his father. This warms her heart, as she understands the pessimistic mortician has a soft spot for his father. She walks on and finds herself back to the morgue. She checks one of the rooms, where she sees a corpse in an ice chamber. Then she squeals as she finds Elvis behind her. He asks why she seems obsessed with this place. Annabelle answers that she keeps having flashbacks of someone over her, which seems to be an initial memory when she woke up. Besides, she has this inexplicable feeling towards this place, as if the morgue holds the answer to why she came back to life. Elvis gives her a sympathetic look, then he invites her to watch the television. The next day, Annabelle resumes her painting duty. Resigned, Elvis joins her. The two start playing around with paints. Elvis doesn't know it yet, but he's slowly falling for her. Charlie takes a peek at them. He is satisfied to see his son enjoying the company of a girl. He'll be happy to leave this life knowing his son will be in good hands. As the sun sets, Elvis and Annabelle look at the magnificent nature. They are grateful and appreciative, especially Annabelle, that they get to experience this seemingly ordinary, but wonderful moment. On the third day of Annabelle's stay, Elvis shows her a newspaper headline with an article about her disappearance. But Annabelle doesn't care about it. Technically, she ran away, she wasn't kidnapped, so there's no point in worrying. They continue painting the walls when Annabelle looks back at the barren land within the property. She thinks that it should be cultivated and planted with flowers, despite Elvis warning her that it will take a miracle to grow anything there. But just like earlier, he gives in to Annabelle's wishes. Riding in the hearse, they both go to a garden center in town to buy seeds, fertilizers, and other gardening products. When they come back home, Annabelle immediately prepares the tractor. Elvis looks at her with amusement on his face. He can see the passion and determination on Annabelle's face, which makes him feel warm inside. He's wise enough to know that letting her do her thing is the best for all parties involved. So he leaves her there and focuses on his main job. Annabelle finally starts the tractor and starts plowing the land. Moments later, the Morrow funeral home gets a visit from a police officer. He asks Charlie and Elvis if they've seen a woman named Annabelle Lee. Of course, both father and son deny knowing such a person. When the officer asks about the one who's operating the tractor in the distance, they pretend he's a relative named Archero. The officer buys their explanation and leaves them. A couple of hours later, Elvis comes to Annabelle, who has finished plowing and planting the seeds and is now washing the dirt off her body. He chides her for being careless about her presence in the house, but she brushes it off. She says it's no big deal, and she can always leave if she's troubling them. Then she sprays him with water to wash away the seriousness in him. That night, Elvis reads for his father again, but Charlie cuts him off, saying that he likes Annabelle very much for his son. Elvis blushes and awkwardly tells his father they cannot be together. But Charlie hopes for it, because he wants his son to be happy, and Annabelle is perfect for him. Elvis assures his dad it's not going to happen, although a small part of him is considering the possibility. After leaving his father's room, he sees Annabelle wearing his mother's clothes. She asks if they can go for a short drive that night, where no people can recognize her. He says no, but rather invites her for a walk. He brings her to the bridge where his mother ended her life. As they lie down, they see stars scattered in the sky. Annabelle thinks they're beautiful and remarks that after all the tragedies she's experienced, moments like this remind her that miracles are still possible. But Elvis is inclined to be pessimistic. After all, as he tells her, his mother took her on Christmas Day, when everyone is supposed to be festive. Charlie has never been the same since. Full of empathy, Annabelle kisses him. Then she gets a flash of that recurring memory of a blurred man leaning over her. She doesn't have the time to elaborate, because they hear police sirens driving toward the funeral home. They come back and see Charlie talking to two officers. They only enter once they're sure the officers have left. Charlie says the police think that Annabelle has been there, but he lied to them, telling them that she was indeed there, but took off using their car. Annabelle regrets that Charlie has to experience all this because of her selfishness to get away from her reality. She's ready to leave the house, but Elvis won't let her. Charlie tells them they can go. He assures his son he has everything he needs in the house, so he must go with Annabelle to keep her safe. Despite his disabilities, Charlie is sympathetic and understands her need to get away for a while. Knowing that he can trust his father and wanting to get away himself, Elvis agrees. They use the hearse to drive away. Annabelle is sobbing about how she's inconvenienced them, how she had so much fun with them for the first time in her life, and how she realizes she hadn't really lived her life up until then. She now understands, in a way, why Elvis's mom ended her life. If there's no meaning in it, then why continue? She asks him if there are times he thinks of offing himself that way. In an offhand manner, he says yes, but retracts his answers and says no. He could never do that to his father. Annabelle tells him that if he ever thinks that way, he should call her, and she'll be there to listen to him. He scoffs at this offer, which offends her very much. The next day, Annabelle decides to teach him a little lesson. As Elvis goes out of the hearse to relieve himself, she locks the doors and starts the engines. She makes a show of leaving him stranded by the beach, unless he apologizes for his behavior last night. Resigned and exasperated, Elvis says sorry, and that's enough for Annabelle. She lets him in, but she takes over the wheel. Then she drives madly, not caring for anything in the world. Today, she's going to do what she hasn't done before, take control of her life, and let things be as they are. They proceed to another town, where no one knows who Annabelle is. They enter boutiques, try out some clothes, and run away without paying. This part isn't exactly the moral definition of living a life, but Annabelle couldn't care less. They take their time riding carnival rides and hanging out like hippies. Elvis slowly opens up and enjoys her company. His life has been serious and dull before Annabelle, and now it seems like it isn't so bad to take time to breathe. While Elvis and Annabelle are enjoying their escapade, Geneva arrives at the Morehouse house. It looks like no one's there, so she takes her liberty to look around. She's certain her daughter's been there. She proceeds to the empty morgue and looks for evidence. Just as she's about to leave, she glimpses something inside the trash bin. To her horror and disgust, she finds a photograph of Elvis kissing Annabelle when she was still a corpse. Apparently, Elvis thought no one would find out about this if he simply threw away the evidence. Shocking Geneva Moore is Charlie, who has come up behind her silently. With this, she runs to the police and reports her findings. Back to our protagonists, they have spent enough days frolicking around town. During that time, they finally give in to their impulses and make love with each other. It's such a blissful escapade for them, but they know it's almost time to return. Elvis asks her what she plans to do about the whole pageant thing, but Annabelle doesn't really want to talk about it. Then she tosses the question back at him. Elvis says he'll simply go back to being a mortician. He wants to write a horror novel, but he's not confident enough that he'd do well. They'll worry about those things tomorrow, but for now, they'll enjoy each other's company. It's raining the next day. Elvis and Annabelle decide to buy some supplies at a convenience store. They don't know yet that their faces splash the front page of the newspaper until they see it. Annabelle is speechless at first, seeing the picture of Elvis leaning over her lifeless body for a kiss. Now those flashes of vision seem to make sense. She goes out of the store and confronts Elvis, who has just seen the news from a newspaper stand. He tries to explain to her that it isn't what it looks like, but Annabelle feels betrayed, and rightfully so. There's no time for them to talk, as the police have already arrived to arrest Elvis Moreau. Annabelle Lee becomes the hot topic of news again. This time as an accessory to an alleged necrophiliac tendency of a mortician. Sensationalism and the lack of explanation from Elvis make things more complicated as it is. Even the sheriff who arrested him thinks he's into some deranged activities. But Elvis stands by his truth that he never defiled corpses before, during, or after embalming them. He simply took a photo of them and put them in his scrapbook. Annabelle watches all of this through the television. She won't rest until she knows the truth from Elvis himself. She visits him in the prison and demands to know exactly what happened the night she came back to life. At first, Elvis doesn't see any point, because he's already in jail. His victim mentality frustrates Annabelle. She's right when she says she got hurt more than anyone by what had happened, yet she chooses to forgive and move on. She says it'll do both of them good if he only tells her what happened, because he owes her that. Elvis finally relays the details of that night, of how he kissed her, how he didn't intend to take a picture, and how she sat up after the kiss. Finally, the truth. But instead of relief, Annabelle feels exasperation and sadness. It was a miracle what happened to her, and yet Elvis still chooses to see the tragedies of the world. A few days later, he is released from prison. The Lee family chooses not to press charges. It's raining hard, but it doesn't deter the press people from following him home to get his side of the story. Meanwhile, Charlie sits on a bench after playing a round of golf. He's satisfied with his score, despite the heavy rain. He thinks it's time to go, and that's what Elvis sees upon arriving. His father, lifeless on the ground. He looks helpless as he shouts his father's name, his only reason for living. After a few days, the ambulance delivers back his father's body for embalming. He feels heavy as he makes sure his father will look good for the last time. He buries his father, then becomes a recluse, refusing to go out in public. What's the point? He thinks. He can't see anything worth living for. He hangs the noose, steps on a chair, and places it. As he's about to step off the chair, another strong gust of wind opens the window, bringing light in. And Elvis sees that the once barren land behind the house is now full of blooming sunflowers. What did he say to Annabelle? That only a miracle could make anything grow there. He missteps, but fortunately, he's able to step on the chair again and remove the noose. There's no point wallowing in misery. It's time to take some action and hope for the best. Meanwhile, Annabelle is soaking in the bathtub as she watches the news. She's been contemplating so she slowly pushes the small television into the tub with her foot. Then she sees a broadcast of Elvis painting the words, "I love you, Annabelle," in front of his house. Not wasting any time, she runs to the mortuary. She finds him lying in the middle of the sunflower field, seemingly enjoying the miracle of life. She lies down beside him. They look at each other and see a whole lifetime in each other's eyes.